Hey everyone, Zach here, and I'm excited to welcome Dave Sutton, the VP of Biz Development and Industry Relations at Montway. We're going to dive into some fun topics, including vehicle reconditioning, condition report writing, and the recovery industry. It's going to be a great conversation. Dave, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, I love talking about the car business. Any aspect of it, it's time well spent. I always learn something from every interaction, and that's been over a good bit of time for me. So if I can share any today, be helpful, I'm happy to do so.
Awesome. And to kick off this podcast today, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into the auto industry?
Sure. So I was kind of born into it. I was actually born in Detroit, spent my earliest years in Detroit proper, 313 area code, and then moved to the suburbs and grew up around Detroit. My dad worked for AMC for a while. Uncles worked with Chrysler. They worked for GM. Neighbors worked for Ford. I mean, you just grew up in Detroit. And later, when I went on to go to Central Michigan University, studied business. And then this was in the early 80s. And then there was an opportunity, a new minor added called Management Information Systems. This thing called the internet was percolating up and things like that. So my wife was following the same track. She was my fiance at the time. We jumped into that. We said, you know what, probably be good to be able to write a computer program, understand systems, blah, blah, blah. And again, this is like 83, 84, 85. And it turned out to be a good thing because when we graduated, GM had just acquired EDS, Ross Perot's company, to shore up on their IT services. And we were graduating. We had a business degree. We could program. We wanted to stay in Michigan. We wanted to live in the Detroit area. And I ended up spending 14 years with EDS. It was a really good career. I was closely tied to the GM account. And for my last 4 years, I actually was doing a GM job as kind of a contract employee to them, working part of the GM Decision Support Center, working on GM strategy projects. I left that, joined a small consulting group that spun out of GM, and we actually had almost all of our projects were with IBM corporate in New York. But then we also did projects in other parts of the world, wherever we were needed to do strategic decision-making, strategy design, development, training the new IBM execs. I left that and joined Volkswagen of America and had a good 10-year run with them. 10 years that I was there, I coordinated the pre-owned strategy between the auto finance company, Volkswagen Credit, Audi Financial Services, and the VW and Audi brands in US and Canada. So that was an exciting time. And the last, I think 5-6 years of that, I was managing the auction operations for VW and Audi. So we sold at 26 auto auctions in the US and Canada. We sold about 120,000 vehicles per year. Most of them were off lease, some recovered vehicles, some company cars. That's where I really fell in love with the wholesale auto industry. Got to know a lot of the major players at Manheim, at ADESA, the independent auctions, got to know the dealers, what they were looking for, and was absolutely blessed with an awesome team that handled the auction operation for VW and Audi. And then after I left there, I joined Carfax, a vehicle history company. I took my knowledge, what I knew about wholesale there, and helped them in the data acquisition part of their business, and developed a data product and helped to develop a second data product, which basically could help a consignor, a commercial consignor, know what's on the vehicle history report prior to them reconditioning a car, validating condition reports, and ultimately properly disclosing it so that car got into the right buyer and they understood what they were getting. Because prior to that, you had dealers reading the Carfax reports, and then that may alter how much they're willing to bid for a car. Maybe it's got an awesome report, so they know they're going to be able to retail it easier, so their willingness to pay is higher than normal. Or the converse is also true. Yeah, it looks okay, but man, this thing's been driven by Stevie Wonder. I mean, it's got dense dings, it's got a bad history. And so it's probably going to be a little bit more difficult to retail, maybe more difficult to finance, so that, getting that information out ahead of time, the commercial consigners and a product called Consignor Alert seemed to be a big hit. We did well with that. We did a similar product called Auction Alert. And then just over 4 years ago, I left Carfax and I consulted for a little bit with Montway Auto Transport, liked what I saw, loved what I saw, and joined them full-time as a VP of Sales and Industry Relations just over 3 years ago. That brings me to today.
Really cool story, Dave, and you're definitely a veteran of the automotive industry. So my next question, condition report writing, it's always been a crucial part of the vehicle resale process. How have you seen condition report writing change over the years, especially with the rise of digital platforms?
Wow, we could talk for 2 hours on this subject, but I'll try to hit the high points. So when I first started, the condition report reports largely were on paper. They were the white, the yellow, or the pink copy, and then things got digitized, and they were in a brick where they were answering specific questions. And then they started adding photos. And said, oh yeah, we add a photo. Well, you take the photos that you did back in the 90s for a condition report, compare them to the awesome stuff you can get done today. It was amazing. So when you think of a condition report, there's a few different elements to it. One is who's writing the report? Right now with technology, there's several apps out there where a lessee or an owner of a vehicle can walk around the car, they're prompted, they follow the prompts, they take the pictures. If the picture's not in frame or not good enough, they're politely asked to retake the picture. So one could say, well, that's a condition report. But really, to me, if you're buying a car, and the more valuable the car, the more important the condition report, you really want to be sure that the person who's doing it is highly skilled. And it always perplexed me within the wholesale world is sometimes the most entry-level folks were the guys that they shoved outside in the cold and the rain and the sun, and they wrote the condition reports, sometimes under adverse condition. But it's so important because if you get it right, you're going to get the right money on the right car. If you get it wrong, you're going to have a higher than normal arbitration rate, or other bad things can happen. And the thing that really, really pointed it out to me was when I was with Volkswagen of America and managing the auction operations, we were pretty progressive at the time. And I inherited a great program from Tom Caniglia, who had since retired, and he's left us since then, but he's in the NAAA Hall of Fame. And he was a very, very crafty car guy. And so he had developed what they call the Audi, or what do they call them? They call them tech centers, VCI tech centers. And so at 12 of the auctions, we actually had a dedicated garage space where the auction gave it to us essentially rent-free. We brought in our own people or person, one or two, who actually acted as shop managers. And they took the cars that were coming back, and if it was a car that they could make CPO eligible, CPO ready, they did everything a retail dealer would do. They were trained, they went through great training, they produced great vehicles, and those provided a very nice reference point in the guidebook saying, this is what a 3-year-old Passat should sell for. And so we did that through great cooperation with our auction partners. And then beyond that, though, you can only touch so many cars and produce so many cars. And the upstream sales platforms hadn't totally taken over yet. So we were still getting a good volume of cars through the physical auction. And one of the things I started is I looked across the industry, looked to see what GM Finance was doing and others, because there's a great fraternity within the remarketing world. And a lot of us started adopting what we call smart repairs, which basically, if a vehicle arrives at an auction, and hopefully it's not going to be there long. You know, we like to keep our days to sale right around 20 from the time it was checked in to the time it was sold. Is if it was obvious that maybe it needed a fresh battery, you know, they were jumping it all the time. If we could do some things to make the car run through the sale better and ultimately be a better value to the dealer, the rule was no lipstick. Don't do any temporary repairs. Don't get it to limp over. That doesn't mean we filled every car with a full tank of premium gas. But what it did mean is, no Rust-Oleum over rust. If you fix it right, like it was your own car. And the reason for doing that is you have to be able to be a trusted seller. So you rely upon these condition reports to be accurate. And so you look at it, and on paper, and everything's reviewed on paper before you even look at the car, it's got to be a candidate for, what we'd want to enhance. And condition report writing can be enhanced if you know the vehicle history. If it's been in rear end incidents, front end incidents, to look for quality repairs. We used to call it frame damage, but I don't remember the last time I saw a passenger vehicle on a frame. It's all unibody now. But the condition reports, if they're in the hands of somebody who's been trained well, there's great training available through the NAAA. The guy who does it, Bryce, is great. The guy who did it before him, Matt Arias, who's now with ACB, he was a great guy. They trained me, and I learned a lot. And I think anybody who's involved in the wholesale industry should go through that training, because that is the thing that's going to cause you to, if you know what to look for, you're going to know when you see a good condition report, you're going to be able to use that information to your advantage to properly recondition the car, and most importantly, to properly disclose the car. So it's evolved quite a lot. Now there's some products out there that blow me away. You just drive your car into a spot, or they drive the car. It's circled by cameras and AI is working. They look at the underbody. ACB has products like this. There's a few other companies out there who have that product, or competitive products. They're all the best, I'm sure. But it does give the buyer a whole lot of information. And again, if I'm looking for a transportation special, not so important. I'm going to trust my ear. I'm going to trust my nose. I'm going to trust my experience. But cars are so darn expensive now. The more expensive the car, the more important it is to make sure that there's a good condition report written. And I would love to see the condition report writer's name on every report. Like, this is my work. You sign it like a painting. Like, this is what I do. And so certain condition report writers, not that you'd want to influence them in an improper way, but they should be recognized, because they can be real heroes of the industry. I know as a consignor for Volkswagen Credit, if we had a guy who understood our product, who did a good job, I would pretty much tell the auction, keep Joe or Sam or Sue or whomever on our account. If you have to pay him more, fine, I'll pay it. They were that valuable to our business.
And could you touch on photos, video, like some of the tech aspect about the condition report being even more evolved year over year with the increase in technology?
Wow, the technology is amazing, and they're coupling it with AI. But the ability, the resolution of the cameras, the ability to look around, spin a picture, to focus in on what you want to see. Sometimes you can see a car better on the online condition report than you can in the auction lane. The auction lane is awesome. There's lots of excitement, and it's a circus. But if you really want to study something, I know an awful lot of dealers. I work with 3 screens here at my office here in Florida, but I know a lot of dealers deal with 6. I don't think I could do that. And incredible high resolution. And they can really, really, really get a good look at the, if it's been repainted, the quality of the paint. Guys who are smarter than I can look at a car and know instantly if it's been hit, how bad the hit was, and look at those areas more carefully. The measurement to, is it within specs, how it was manufactured, having all that being done automatically. I mean, it's not replacing a good used car person, but boy, it's getting close. And this is extremely, extremely enabling for wholesale car platforms selling to remote bidders and buyers. They don't necessarily have to be there at the auction. They can trust the condition reports if they're done by the right vendor or auction house, and if it's being disclosed by the right seller. And I think that's a huge thing. Ultimately, the auction is there to, whether it's a wholesale, online, or brick and mortar auction, their job is to create a fair marketplace for buyers and sellers to connect. And they offer services to help that. But ultimately, it's you, the seller, whether you're a commercial seller or a dealer selling or third-party remarketing services selling, you need to properly represent your cars. If you do not, it will come back to bite you. You won't be able to command a premium. You won't have loyal followers or buyers with your car. And that's one thing. If anybody, if you're a dealer who's selling, be on the block, interact with your sellers. And if you're too embarrassed to do that, I wouldn't want to buy a car from you.
And kind of shifting gears, for those not familiar, and you mentioned this term a little earlier, explain what frame damage is and how it affects both the vehicle's value and the safety perception of the vehicle.
Sure. So the term frame damage is a little bit of a dated term. Now it's more accurately called unibody damage. And basically, the way cars used to be built back when I was buying cars and back in high school in the 70s and 80s, it was largely had the body that set on the frame, body on frame was the most normal. And then over the years, as we've tried to improve fuel economy, the frame's a pretty heavy component. So the automotive manufacturers figure out ways to create a unibody, which basically the panels of the car, the structure of the car was all designed to absorb impact, to make them safer. and also to be lighter without a frame. And that's through a unibody, through some amazing engineers. They figure this out and they fine tune it over time, which is awesome because a car can be crash rated to a certain mileage and rating, everything like that. But once some of those key components, let's say it's the B pillar on the car, the C pillar, the A pillar, or some other major, the rear quarter, once that's compromised and it's damaged, it can never be the same just about. I mean, you do have some repair shops who have the right tools and technology to make it right. But once a car incurs that damage, it does lose value because it's probably never going to be as safe again. And there's a question mark to it. There's a little bit of uncertainty is how well is it going to perform if, God forbid, some person in the family or whatever is involved in a car wreck or a car crash. So that's unibody damage. And of course, it's a big scale. It can be very, very small where, I've got 2 kids, love them to pieces. Would I put them in a car that has unibody damage? Yeah, I probably would. But I want to know a little bit more about, okay, what was the severity of the incident, et cetera. There's a lot of people who look for unibody and they specialize and they know there's people who run away from that. But a good salesperson can talk through that and explain it. And so I know a lot through it because I was involved in disclosing it properly when I worked for Volkswagen Credit and managed the auction operations. Later, I learned even more when I was with Volkswagen Credit, when I was with Carfax, because Carfax was reporting on the vehicle history report. Well, Carfax says, well, AutoCheck says, and all that other stuff. And I, if your audience, if I can assure them one thing today, both those vehicle history companies do a good job. I think I've got to tip my hat to Carfax because they have more data sources. And I was part of it, and I know how the sausage is made, and they really, really work hard to describe it accurately. And what they're trying to do is just level set so that the person buying the car isn't surprised. They know exactly what they're getting. And so all the rules that go for full disclosure from the wholesale side, I think apply for the retail side. And if you fairly represent your product, you put it in its best possible light, you're going to get all the money for the car, and that customer is going to refer people to you, or they're going to tell other wholesale buyers, yeah, go to Volkswagen Credit Lane. They're good dudes. They'll take care of you. One thing you got to be careful of, though, in the wholesale world, is occasionally you get buyers who want to come back and arbitrate a car. This was worse than you said, et cetera, et cetera. And we generally just say, hey, if you didn't like the car, we'll just take it back. They're like, no, I really like the car. I just want it for less. And we'll say, well, you bought it for that much. There's a guy who's willing to pay $100 more than you, right behind you. We'll just take the car back if you want. And so once you develop some good policies like that, I think they know that you're going to work extra hard to minimize the times arbitrations are even requested. And if we called it wrong, if we missed it, we're more than happy to, or we were, I say we because it was such a great team, take the car back, take it to your local auction as part of your network, check it out, make sure you didn't miss something. If you didn't, and if the dealer's yanking your chain a little bit, you write their name in the book and they probably won't get a lot of consideration in the future. But if you miss something, you got to go back. If you're smart, you're process oriented, say who missed it? How do we miss it? How can we prevent it in the future? And you make sure all of our locations know it, and you get to this continuous learning cycle. And I think that's how some commercial consigners like Volkswagen Credit, Toyota Financial Services, GM Financial, they really, really work hard to make sure that they properly disclose the cars.
So moving on to vehicle reconditioning, when is it appropriate to recon a vehicle before selling it? What factors should the sellers consider with recon?
So recon, I can speak to it in the wholesale world, but I think so much applies to the retail world. The basic thing is wash the car, wash and back the car. Some guys just just as is, blah, blah, blah. Spend the $20, have the car washed and back so that the dealers see exactly what they're getting so they're not surprised. Otherwise, they're going to think you're hiding something. Oh, they left it dirty for a reason. No, wash and back it. That's one. That's level one recon, everything. If it's an in-op, maybe not that car. If the guys are by with the power washer, spray it off. But for the most part, you want to sell clean cars. And when you look at additional reconditioning, I'm a huge believer in paintless dent removal. We worked a lot with Dent Wizard when I was at Volkswagen, and that company is aptly named. They are wizards. If you get the right crews going, they're fast, they're efficient, and they can pop out door dings. They can do it very, very cost effectively because for them, they don't have a lot of windshield time going from dealership to dealership. They roll into an auction. They're there for 2 or 3 days. and they're busy, but they do high quality work. Hailstorm, these guys are like the knights in shining armor to come back and restore the value of all those vehicles. PDR to me was always a no-brainer. The other thing is the vehicles have to be safe to drive and operate in the lane at the auction. And a lot of dealers, a surprising number, if they buy a car, they put on the dealer place, they want to drive it home or have one of the guys in their crew drive it home. Make sure the car is roadworthy if at all possible. That means decent tires, the seat belts work, things like that. It seems like a small thing, but it's just the right thing to do. You go beyond there, stone chips, repairs, cracks in windshields, quick, easy. You should be able to do it for less money in a wholesale setting than any dealer can do at their own retail setting. Because a lot of times people don't think about it. Depending upon the store, if it's your own little store, you can run it however you want. But oftentimes the used car manager is behind retail customers. So it slows down the time that you can retail the car when you get back to your store. So part of doing good quality recon is you make it easier for the wholesale purchaser of that vehicle to get that car on the front line and sold. So most major consigners, they'll sell once a week or once every 2 weeks or maybe once every 4 weeks. So you have time in between your sales events to recondition the car. Shame on you. The day the car arrives, condition report's done, you should have your criteria met if it's below 100,000 miles. If it's condition grade 2.2 or higher, then these are the repairs that are prior authorized up to this total dollar amount. Just do it. As a matter of fact, not only do I want you to do it, if you don't do it, I'm going to be very upset. And so the auction, if they play their cards right, they know, great, this consignor wants this stuff done. They have all the vendors on property to do the repairs. Sometimes it's replacing the tires. Maybe it's just used tires. Maybe the tires are completely shot. If you can do it cost effectively and time effectively, do those cosmetic repairs. Bumper covers. Wow, what a huge impact item. Wholesale cost to repair and repaint a bumper cover is really easy. Again, we're just talking about the cover, folks. We're not talking about all the other stuff, but it really takes away from the look of a car. And some of the larger auctions, they have great paint facilities or they have local vendors who can come in and do the work. As long as they're doing quality work, have that type of stuff done. Beyond that, clean the interiors, do all the stuff. You don't have to make it complete frontline ready unless you have a program that's going to designate it that way. But if the car's sitting idle, you can be a good consignor. You can help the auction make more revenue off the car. Certainly negotiate the rates, make sure you're paying fair, market price to get this stuff done. But when a dealer's looking to buy a car in the lane, no matter who's selling it, they're looking at it and say, I can retail that car, I think, for around 16 grand. I know my transportation cost to get it back to my store is going to be this. I know my auction buy fees and all the other stuff. They know how to quickly back down to, okay, well, I can afford to bid up to this amount. And the thing that causes that amount to be a lower amount is if they still have to do some of the things you could have done preemptively. And if you do that properly, not only does it make for a happy customer, also shows better values in the guidebooks, which is really important if you're with a captive finance company.
So what are some of the most impactful recon services that could enhance a dealer's vehicle marketability? And what sort of ROI can they expect out of investing in this kind of recon process?
Great question. Paintless dent removal is a big one. I would say paintless dent removal, back in the day, you could get up to 8 dings per panel for like $200. That is a great value. And for every dollar you put in, you get $2 back. Windshields and glass. You should be able to do that very, very cost effectively. Makes the vehicle safer to operate while you're selling it at auction. It's something I can't, unless it's a complete, transportation $2,000 special, that is going to have to be done. So with that, you should be able to get $1.25 to $1.40 back for every dollar that you put in. A car that starts and runs and operates because you put in a new battery, you get $2 back for everything there. Nothing worse than just, it's an older car, we're going to try to limp it through. And the dealer's not going to retail the car like that. If they have to charge it every day, if it goes dead, check the battery health. If it's not there, replace it, get it done right. Those are the biggest ones, I think. The other things that you can do, I mean, there's, depending upon the wheels, that if it has alloy wheels that have been scratched up and dinged up, a lot of times you can do alloy wheel repair very, very cost effectively and get back $3 for every dollar that you put in it. Because if the dealer had to buy new wheels, now you're talking about him deducting $1,000 to $2,000 from what he was willing to pay for the car. The other thing is detailing the car. We used to pay for highline detail for all of our average and above average cars because it was pretty much frontline ready, when we sold it wholesale, and it may need to be touched up, but it helped the dealers retail the cars faster. And for detailing, shoot, I think you get $3 to $5 back for every dollar that you put in.
Pretty significant. And do you see dealers outsourcing this or handling it in-house? And do they use any technology that you've seen to kind of manage the recon process?
Boy, it's all over the board. Every dealer, especially used car dealers, some of the smartest people I've met are in that business. It's their money on the line. Every vehicle is an opportunity to make money or lose money. And you're hoping everything's making money, but that's not always the case. But some of them, they've got great relationships either with adjacent vendors and stores that will come in and handle parts of the recon for them. I think that's probably the best model. Sometimes if you're a smaller store, you can kind of do it yourself and send a guy away so he can do the paintless dent removal for you, et cetera. But the challenge with that is you don't have a lot of bench strength. Should he leave, get married, he's on his honeymoon, you lose that capacity. So if you deal with vendors and you have good relationship with your vendors, I think that's probably the better play for a lot of it. You got to look at your staff. Who do you have on your staff? What are the porters doing? Are the porters available to do detailing? And can you appropriately train them, give them the right tools and products to use to do that, so that their utilization rate, when they come to work in the morning, they've got a full day. Don't kill them, but give them a full day, make use of that. A lot of times, what I found in business is when you look at the utilization rate of assets and people, if a company is doing well financially, the utilization rate is 75 to 85%. If a company's struggling, they're struggling to make payroll, they're just not doing all that they could or should do, invariably, I think the utilization rate, they've got people who are idle. And that's not the workers' problem. That's the management team's problem. They've got to design the right processes and systems and staffing levels and incentive programs to keep those people productive. And what you do, I don't know about you, but I love working on something. At the end of it, it looks better, it's nicer, it's safer. And I think people are wired that way, not looking to hide. You just got to give them the right tools and training and support, and they'll do great things for you.
So now shifting gears to repossession and recovery, can you explain for the audience the difference between a repossession and a recovery in the auto industry?
Sure. So when you think of a repossession, essentially it's a recovery. The words are synonymous. But when we think about a repo, we think of an involuntary repo where a repo or a recovery agent will pick up a car. It's parked in an area that they've got cameras out. They've got camera cars driving throughout the neighborhoods, reading license plates, trying to profile cars, trying to spot it, trying to find clues, breadcrumbs somewhere. And then once they zero in on where the car is at, the car is usually parked, usually in the evening or at night. If it's garage, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. But when they pick up the vehicle, they can't break the piece. It can't be like a feud or a war going out there in the parking lot in their driveway. If things get a little bit weird or hairy, you just need to back down and go away. That's what they should be doing. And what's crazy is those people are just doing their job. I mean, that vehicle is owned by a finance company. The person driving it has fallen in their payments. I know the lenders. I know that they work really, really hard. They do not want to repossess cars. They want you to make your payments. They can work with you, but sometimes it doesn't work out. That's going to happen for a myriad of reasons. If that happens, then the recovery agent is a very valuable part of the automotive ecosystem. And sadly, a lot of the companies now require their guys to wear bulletproof vest, body cams, because people can get a little bit crazy and out of sorts. What's interesting though, is depending upon the portfolio of cars, like when I was with Volkswagen, most of our cars that we sold, we had to announce them properly as a repossessed vehicle. I don't think the word recovery was really in wide use at the time, but I think 40% were voluntary repos. They brought the car in, they dropped it off at the dealer. They ran into a curveball in life. It could be a huge hospital bill, illness, loss of a job, and they just couldn't make that payment anymore. And so they turn it in with both keys. They take their personal possessions, and then our job as remarketers was, okay, honor that person, honor that vehicle, get the vehicle to auction. You have to be careful about what you invest in it. If you do those repairs and recon that we talked about earlier, because those go against the proceeds, and the customer is responsible for the deficiency. So let's say it was a retail car, and they still owe $10,000, and you sold it after it was recovered, and you sold it for $8,000. We'll keep the math easy. That person has still a bill for $2,000. They just didn't walk away from it, and it goes still to collections. They have to deal with that. Last couple of years, it was crazy because used cars were more valuable. And so they may owe $10,000 on the car, and you sell it, and it's like, oh, we sold it for $11,000. We need to send you a check, which just blows my mind. But we were in some crazy times due to the pandemic. But when you think about recovered vehicles, I can send you. I'll have to check to see if Vaughn, the president of the American Recovery Association, will give you permission to share with your dealers. It's an awesome 6-minute video on the recovery process, all the way through the proper way cars are picked up, when they're brought back to the recovery yards, how they're stored. Talk about a fragmented industry, the recovery industry. There's some really big companies, a lot. The majority are small companies who are real estate challenged, equipment challenged, employee challenged, and it does create a little bit of a hardship when you're trying to move those cars from the recovery yard to auction to sell them. And the industry is really wrestling with that. But when you think about there's the vehicle, there's the people's possessions in the vehicle, there's keys. Are the keys available? One key, both keys? Keys can be super expensive depending upon the make and model. But typically, once a vehicle is recovered and it's secured by a recovery agent, or it's at a recovery or repo yard, it's kind of like game over. And then that individual has the opportunity to come and collect their personal effects. There's a lot of things they have to do to secure personally identifying information for protect the rights of those individuals. And I think on the whole, they do a great job. And then once the vehicle is recovered, some people, the naive, think, oh yeah, that car, so it was somebody drove it like crazy, they didn't take care of it, et cetera, et cetera. Part of that's maybe, but rarely. Make sure that the oil's been changed. That might be relevant. Look at the maintenance records. So, so companies like Carfax, provide that and track that. But the other things, it's just a car. They didn't kill the car. They just drove the car and missed payments. And so when you get to those cars, that's where you may want to be looking at it more closely. You want to pay attention to maybe some slight cues as to maybe how the car was driven, how long the car was driven, how hard the car was driven. There's geographic factors. Was it in an urban environment? Was it in a country environment? I won't say who, but the worst lease return ever that I ever saw was a very, 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 very expensive car that a diplomat's son who had some substance abuse issues saw fit to drive through a field. And there was not a panel on the vehicle all the way around and on top that wasn't dinged, dented, scraped, or scratched. It was ridiculous. That was the cheapest Bentley someone ever bought.
Oh my gosh. And, you mentioned earlier the recovery space, somewhat fragmented. And I would have to think there've been a lot of changes in the space in the past, let's say 10 years. How do you see technology playing a role in the recovery industry? And what are some of the big changes, in the past decade?
Wow. I'm just really coming up to speed on that myself. I was aware of it, as a consignor. I knew we recovered, or we had agents repossess cars. But now that I work for Montway Auto Transport, we move a lot of cars from recovery yards to auctions. I mean, there's a lot of cars that need that, but that's a challenge because the recovery yards aren't available 24/7. It's not like an auction where it's easy to get in and out. You have to make appointments. The cool thing is there's companies out there like RDN that provide tools not only to the recovery agents to receive assignments, to pick up cars, to know the location of cars, to report on the condition of the cars, and basically they're able to do their whole job on a tablet through their software. Transporters can use their product ClearData to confirm, instead of calling, trying to reach a receptionist who he or she may have just got in, they weren't there the night before, they don't know what vehicles were dropped off in the dark of the night by the agents, but we can see just through their data, oh, the car was checked in, the car has both keys, it runs, steers, brakes, and drives, it's good for pickup. And there's other things that you have to be aware of, like when the redemption period, et cetera. But the biggest thing is the information tools that are available to recovery agents, to transportation companies, and to auctions are pretty amazing. I think RDN is a leader. MBSI is one of their competitors that's out there. But the guy, there's a gentleman, Justin Zane, with Open Lane, who RDN rolls up underneath. And he and I talked at last year's Used Car Week. I learned so much from him, continue to talk to him, learn more and more from him and his team. And I'm just encouraging everyone in the industry. I'm a huge, huge advocate of education. Way back in 2008, I'm going back, 2008, the International Automotive Remarketers Alliance developed a certified automotive remarketer curriculum. It's 20 modules. It was at the time roughly, if you printed it out on space and a half paper, it's like over 400 pages of content about all the aspects of remarketing. And there's a module in there on recovery and repo. And now there's a module in there on transportation that I co-wrote with some others in the industry. And so when whatever part of the industry you're playing in, the more you do to educate yourself, so you understand not only what your role is, but what the other, I guess, players in the field are doing in their positions, it allows you to be a better participant in the circus that we call the automotive marketplace. So I was fortunate enough to be involved in developing the curriculum, and I was a third person who became a certified automotive remarketer. And I'm so excited because I think by this time next year, we'll have over 500 certified automotive remarketers who've been through the program.
Nice. And looking ahead, how do you see the future of the recovery industry, especially with the use of vehicle tracking, telematics, improving, changing?
I think it's going to improve. I think one, telematics is, you know where the cars are, the cars can be shut off, disabled, whatever, which makes them easier to pick up. The technology does get a little bit scary when you think about the big brother aspects, but I think the pros way overshadow the cons of that. I think recovery agents will have access to some very, very cost-effective tools. They do now. Those tools would just get better. The trucks that they drive are incredible what they can do to do their job safely and efficiently. One of the things that may happen is there may be some other players in this space that there's when you look at the recovery process, there's the actual, where's the car, that piece. So maybe there's companies who become more specialized in pointing out where the car is. Then there's the actual locating the car and securing the car on your truck or on your flatbed or whatever. So the recovery agents, usually when you think of them, you think of that. But then there's also the people who run really slick operations of secure recovery lots that accept the cars and are bringing in the recovered vehicles. They quickly inspect the vehicles, and then they store the vehicles in a very efficient way. Sometimes they're stacked in there pretty darn tight. You know, it's not like a retail car lot where you drive through it. I mean, they've got to make good use of it. They've got to store the cars over a certain redemption period. I mean, there's a lot of information to keep track of. So I think service providers will be offering better tools for them to use. I think there might be an opportunity for some of the bigger recovery companies to do franchise, have multi-sites. If you run 4 sites really, really well, why shouldn't you run 20? And I think there might be some consolidation there, but I think the consolidation will take place more within the actual recovery lot operations, releasing the vehicles. That's where I think things can be systematized, perhaps easier, and they're more capital intensive. But I think the actual recovery of the vehicles, getting the assignments, locating the car, recovering the car, dropping that off, I think that's going to remain fragmented. And I frankly think that's a good thing, because those are individuals who can make a very, very good living. They make it off their intellect, their hard work. And I think if they find like people to work with, the recovery industry, I think, is going through a metamorphosis, and I think it's going to become maybe stratified. There's going to be some elite guys and gals and women who own and run very, very efficient, awesome operations, and the big finance companies are going to align with them, almost guarantee it. And then you're going to have the mid-tier and a bottom tier. What you don't want is you don't want somebody handling maybe an Audi that's worth $30,000. Hauling or moving that in an unsafe vehicle or truck where it could get damaged even further. And then there's the liability issue. So coming from the transportation side, making sure that who's ever moving the vehicle is properly trained, licensed, and insured, not only their company, but that individual driver. I think there's an opportunity for better information, better validation, better information sharing across the different transport companies and auctions. So that's what I see happening in the next 5 to 10 years. It's not going to happen overnight, but that's where it's trending, I think.
Nice. And the current economic climate has definitely changed since the pandemic, rising interest rates, and probably has had some level of an impact on repossession rates. What advice would you give to dealers who are navigating these changes?
I think due to COVID, there was a lot of finance companies who kind of waived or dialed back the recovery efforts in trying to be mindful of the fact that the whole country across the world, people are going through a really, really tough time. But I think that's over. I think basically it's back to business as usual. The challenge is a lot of these recovery companies are not staffed as high as they used to be staffed. They, like a lot of companies, are finding themselves challenged in getting the people to do that type of work. And I think it really starts with the retail side. I mean, if somebody's really stretching to get in a car, certainly they deserve safe transportation to get to work, but maybe it doesn't have to be this car. Maybe it could be this car or this car, something that fits better with their needs. And then every finance person that I know, if you can keep the customer in the car, extend the financing, give them another year, restructure the payments, please do that. One is you're going to make more money. 2 is it's more humane. And 3 is, you never know the value of a car. The biggest thing that people need to, if you haven't learned it already, the last 2.5 years was a complete aberration. Used cars do not appreciate in value unless they're the ones you buy at Mecum or a place like that. The cars will depreciate depending upon the value of the car. It could be $5 a day. It could be $40 a day. But the depreciation curve is like this. So if you can keep somebody in the vehicle, keep them through the term, that's great. If you do have to recover the vehicle, work with reputable people who are not going to create a liability for you or your company.
And finally, is there anything coming down the pipeline at Montway you're excited about this year?
Probably the biggest thing I'm excited about is the technology that the company has. Our sister company, Ship.Cars, has a product called LoadMate Pro. And LoadMate Pro allows a dealer group or fleet company or an auction to manage all the transportation that's coming in or out of their facilities. It manages drive teams. Who drove the car? What time did they pick it up? Where did they pick it up? How many miles did they drive? When did they drop it off? Really helpful information. You have a chain of custody. You can start measuring efficiency. I've got my MBA, I learned it many, many years ago. And if you can measure it, you can improve it. And so transportation has been kind of one of those things where, it's just transportation, just goes from here to here. But the better data you have, the higher your utilization rates can be for people and for vehicles. And we even, talked to some of the auctions. Their trucks, a lot of them own maybe tow truck or two, a few rollbacks. Is they're really, really, really busy right before and after sale day, but they might have a couple idle days. I tell them, hey, we're moving cars all the time. If we need cars moved around your local area, would you be interested in moving those cars from Montway? And they're like, hell yeah. Their drivers want to make money. They want to employ people full time. So I think our product, LoadMate Pro, I believe, is the best tool for a dealer to manage all their transportation. It could be their own drive teams, could be outsourced drive teams, their own equipment, could be local carriers, could be major brokers like Montway. It could all be managed in one place, one dashboard. And, it makes for a very efficient operation with great record keeping. The accountants love it. Investors love it because you can take this one side of your business that's been pretty loosey-goosey, maybe a lot of side money being passed and forth, and it just makes everything transparent. And once you can measure it, you can be more efficient at it. So LoadMate Pro is something we talk a lot about with auto auctions, with fleet lease companies, and anybody who has to manage a large number of vehicles. Keeping track of all those in one spot, wherever you're at, it's all in the cloud. Pretty awesome.
Definitely. And Dave, thanks so much for sharing all your insights today. I'm sure our listeners, they're going to find this episode extremely valuable. So Dave, thanks for joining us on the podcast today.
My pleasure. And if they want to find out more, talk to me, just grab me on LinkedIn. I'm out there. I love talking to people in the business. And dealers are, some people get frustrated by them, especially in the wholesale world. You better shut your mouth and open your ears, because you're going to learn more about what's going on in real business, because those are the guys who got their money out all the time. And I think they're the real heroes of the auto industry.
Couldn't agree more.